22 million. More than 30 years ago, I was the general counsel of the United States Office of Personnel Management. Then I was its deputy director, and that's an advise and consent position, a PAS, Presidential Advise and Senate System consent position. And then I was the acting director after Director Horner left. So I spent 3 years in the belly of the Human Resources Department of the federal government, but it was 30 years ago. A lot has changed, but the basic law, which was the Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, has not changed. But a lot of rules and regulations have changed. So I am not an expert. I am an informed former expert. So I used to be an expert. Now I'm not. And there's a difference. But there's a lot going on with the federal workforce this week and last week. President Trump has issued 3 actions that impact the federal workforce. 4, actually. First of all, he told every federal employee, you got to come back from work, no more remote work. Secondly, he has offered a buyout, an early retirement package to every federal employee. I think it's like 8 months' pay and some benefits. And he did that. Then he fired a number of inspectors general, and then he fired 12 people who prosecute him on Jack Smith's team. Now, the Jack Smith category is of particular interest to me because I'm a lawyer and I was at the Department of Justice before I went to the White House, before I went to OPM. And as a DOJ lawyer, there are some things you know when you do them, you're going in harm's way. You'd better be right. And when you signed on with Jack Smith, I actually believe those lawyers ought to have resigned when Jack Smith went spiraling off into that crazy indictment in the District of Columbia. But I think there's cause there to fire those people, but I don't know if the president can. I want to tell you why. The number of different categories of federal employee, PAS, PA, presidential appointment, Schedule A, Schedule B, Schedule C, and there are other schedules, will make your head spin. And the rules are different for each of them, all because of Jimmy Carter. He passed one significant piece of legislation, the Federal Civil Service Reform Act of 1978. And just to demonstrate, Dwayne's mad. I used all the paper in the machine because I printed off one rule. It's actually not a rule. It's a notice that under the law and regulations of OPM and the Congress is obliged to be published in the Federal Register every now and then. It's a rule from 2020. Accepted service, consolidated listings of Schedules A, B, and C. A notice of the Personnel Management Office on March 6, 2020. This is from when Trump was last president. Do you see this? This is one notice, all right? One notice. It's scores of pages. I don't think it's 100 pages. Dwayne said, why'd you print off a book? Oh, I wanted to tell people that there is in the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology an advanced representative advisor whose authorization is DH 190053, dated January 25 of 201. And then there's a briefing book coordinator and policy advisor. And then if you go back a little bit later, you'll find in the Office of the General Counsel, Office of the Secretary and the Deputy, there's a Director, Office of Support and Mission, Senior Advisor for Strategic Communications, a White House Liaison. These are all PAs in Schedule C. Political appointees in Schedule C. What I'm trying to communicate to you is that people who have opinions on what President Trump has done or hasn't done with regards to either all employees, no more remote work, here's a buyout offer, or a few employees, the inspectors general or the 12 lawyers at DOJ, are almost certainly ill-informed, almost certainly lack the necessary predicate. If you want me to talk, for example, about classical music, you'll figure out pretty quickly, I don't know anything about classical music. I know a few names, Mahler, Beethoven, Brahms, Bach, Mozart. But you asked me to identify their greatest hits. I can't do that. I can tell you a lot about the Cleveland Browns, the Cleveland Guardians, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Ohio State University Buckeyes, who are the national champions. Depends on where you go. Depends on who you're talking to find out expertise. I taught this week West Virginia versus EPA and Loper Bright Enterprises. So I'm kind of up to speed on those two cases. which two of 1,000 cases that make up the highest corpus of law in the United States. I know my way around constitutional law. I know my way around politics. I know my way around my sports teams. And I used to know my way around OPM and the Federal Civil Service. But I don't anymore because there's been a lot that's changed. So the right answer about the Department of Justice lawyers and the Inspector Generals is, I don't know. The right answer about ending remote work and offering a buyout is, I think so. I think you can do that, but I don't know. The right answer is almost always, I don't know. I need to research it, and I need to get smart, or I will give you bad information. No, I don't do that. I give you good information on the Hugh Hewitt Show, and I try and explain to you every time I do what my background is, what my qualifications are, and what I think, and when I might not know what I'm talking about. So I'm not really sure about the inspectors general. I think it's a ridiculous office. I know that Senator Grassley loves them. They're too slow. They don't produce reports that are useful. They are molasses speed. And even the very good ones don't move fast enough for the speed of American government and American media. They are probably from a different era. I also know that we need more PAs, political appointees, Schedule Cs, and we need to be able to fire lawyers whenever we want to. Because lawyers are unlike, especially lawyers at the Department of Justice. There are lawyers everywhere. When I was a general counsel at OPM, I had 30-odd lawyers, and they were specialists in things like pensions and benefits and separation from the service and appeals to the Merit Systems Protection Board, whether or not you could move an employee from, Washington, D.C. to Alaska. They were the experts, and they were there, most of them. There was a general counsel, me, PA, political appointment, SES reserved for political appointments. There's the deputy general counsel, political appointee, SES reserved. And that was it. Everyone else was career. And you have to be career because, really, you'll go crazy studying this stuff, like the Merit Systems Protection Board, unless you want to make it your business, unless you want to make money off it and represent federal workers who feel they've been wrongfully terminated or wrongfully sent somewhere. All I want you to know is almost everything you've heard about this is not well informed. So just kind of hold fire, folks. Donald Trump is the head of the executive branch. We have three branches of government. Article 1, the Congress. Article 2, the presidency. Article 3, the judiciary. The people who work for Article 1 are not subject to the president ever. The people who work for Article 3, the judiciary, are not subject to the president's authority, unilateral authority, ever. A whole bunch of people who work in Article 2, the executive branch, under the theory of the unitary executive or any area you want, just read Article 2, they work for the president. Now, we, beginning in the 1800s, 1890s, I think, maybe 1880s, the Pendleton Act was when we finally had a civil service. I think Teddy Roosevelt was on the first Civil Service Commission. Not sure. I think that's the case. But the Pendleton Act was intended to get some of the patronage out of the civil service. It used to be President A wins and he fires everyone who's around. President B comes in, he fires all of President A's people and replaces them. Federal government was small. Now it's 2 million. It's very rare for gold to make the front page of the Financial Times. I subscribe to two newspapers, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. The last bits of legacy media that I will pay for. Pay for a lot of new media. I pay for the free press. I pay for news items. I pay for the Cleveland sports section from the Cleveland.com. I'm willing to pay for stuff when it's got value, but two newspapers, Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. So I opened up the Financial Times this morning. One of my sponsors is AmericanFederal.com. Nick Robich and his merry band of gold buyers and sellers. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. I bought gold from Nick this month. I do it every January, and I do it with Nick because transparent about the price. Gold is up again today. And he says, here's the price, here's the commission, here's what I'm sending you, here's when it'll get here, we're tracking it, blah, blah, blah. They don't play the float. They're very straightforward. Buy bullion, buy ounces, and they do it with silver. And they'll buy your gold if you want to. You can either go to AmericanFederal.com or you can call 1-800-221-7694. I'll give you the number again in a second. But the Financial Times today hit me. I bought gold in January, and I've been buying gold for a long time. And a little bit, same amount every January. Buy it, buy it, buy it. Well, I didn't know what was going on. Gold has been going up and up and up. Went up again today and at this hour, and it will change. So I don't give you the market report before the markets close and the markets are still open. So I'm not going to give you a market report. But gold is up and everything else is down. Generally, that can change. Markets are open. But gold is up. This is why. Financial Times, maybe the best newspaper in the world. Gold stockpiling in New York leads to London shortage. Wait to withdraw bullion from Bank of England rises sharply as fears of Trump tariffs drive shipments to the U.S. It reads, a surge in gold shipments to the U.S. has led to a shortage of bullion in London as traders amass $82 billion stockpile in New York over fears of Trump administration tariffs. The wait to withdraw bullion stored in the Bank of England's vaults has risen from a few days to between 4 and 8 weeks, according to people familiar with the process, as the Central Bank of London, England, struggles to keep up with demand. Quote, people can't get their hands on gold because so much of it has been shipped to New York and the rest is stuck in the queue, said one industry executive. Liquidity in the London market has been diminished. Since November's U.S. election, gold traders and financial institutions have moved 393 metric tons into the vaults of the COMEX Commodity Exchange in New York, driving its inventory levels up nearly 75% to 926 tons, the highest level since August of 2022. Now, a lot of that, I have no idea why. I don't know what the COMEX is. I don't know why they're doing it. I don't know what it's got to do with tariffs. All I know is that the price of gold has been going up, which usually means demand is going up, which is what this story says. But when you're a dollar cost average guy, you do the same thing on the same day every year or every month or every quarter so that you end up averaging out the cost. There are swings in the cost of everything. So I buy gold in January. Other people buy it monthly. Other people buy it quarterly. Other people don't buy it at all. But if you are going to buy it from AmericanFederal.com, 1-800-221-7694. But at least I know now why the price keeps going up. And it's because people in New York are amassing bullion for reasons I do not understand, nor will I care to find out. I do not care. Now, to Donald Trump. He had another press conference today. He's lapped Joe Biden for press conferences already. It's 10 days in. He's already lapped him, the entire administration. Cut number one, the federal funding freeze order.
Announced in 2015, and we won in 2016. We did very well in 2020, but we did really well just recently. And I'm restating right now to correct any confusion that the media has purposely and somehow, for whatever reason, created Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid have not been affected by any action we're taking in any way, shape, or form. We are merely looking at parts of the big bureaucracy where there has been tremendous waste and fraud and abuse. In that process, we identified and stopped $50 million being sent to Gaza to buy condoms for Hamas. 50 million. And you know what's happened to them? They've used them as a method of making bombs. How about that? We stopped an attempt to make an illicit payment for illegal alien resettlement. We canceled $181 million in DEI training contracts. This is just for the training of people in DEI, which has been terminated and completely terminated. And we paused $1.7 billion in unauthorized payments to foreign organizations, including stopping more than $40 million that was on its way out the door to the very corrupt World Health Organization, which has not done its job and not done it properly. We also... We also blocked $45 million for diversity scholarships in Burma 45. That's a lot of money for diversity scholarships in Burma.
You know that it's common sense. I don't know where these things come from. If it's discretionary spending, that means the president has the discretion to stop it. If it's an entitlement, he doesn't. And so they revoked yesterday's order because it was badly written, and they'll put out a new order, which will use the word discretionary. Cut number 2 on the federal workforce, President Trump.
We have informed the federal workforce, which they've looked to do for many years, that if they're working for the federal government, they must show up to the office on time and on schedule. We don't want them. We don't want them to work from home because, as everyone knows, most of the time they're not working, they're not very productive, and it's unfair to the millions of people in the United States who are in fact working hard from job sites and not from their home. As federal employees, they must meet a high standard. They're representing our government, they're representing our country. If they don't agree by February 6th to show up back to work in their office, they will be terminated, and we will therefore be downscaling our government, which is something that the last 10 presidents have tried very hard to do but failed. Most of the people we're talking about have not been going to their federal offices in many, many years, from even before COVID. But they have nevertheless been paid. Some have worked, some haven't worked, and most of the studies say that some have just gone through the motions. We may ask these people to prove that they didn't have another job during their so-called employment with the United States of America, because if they did, that would be unlawful, as you understand.
I want you to know, you can't have, there are very limited exceptions. You can't have another job if you're working for the Fed. Very limited exception. Very limited. You can write an op-ed occasionally. But President Trump on firm ground, go back to my opening monologue, which is at my YouTube channel. You just came walking in the door and say, what? Can you do that? I explained it all for you, and you can go listen to it on YouTube. A headline at the Wall Street Journal at this hour is Fed, that means Federal Reserve, Fed stands pat on rates, entering new wait-and-see phase. Now, I immediately began to look and see what's that mean for interest rates on the 30-year mortgage, because we have a sponsor, andrewandtodd.com, and their business goes up as the rates go down. Well, rates ticked down a little bit today, but not a lot. Wasn't a rate cut, so it didn't tick down a lot, but it ticked down a little bit. And if you're buying a home, or you're a veteran, you want to put money down, you're a senior citizen, you need a reverse mortgage, you need a home equity line of credit, or you're just an old-fashioned person who got transferred and you have to move from city X to city Y, and you need to sell a home and buy a home, and you need a mortgage on the new home, call up andrewandtodd.com, 888-888-1172. Maybe you're an investor. There are lots of people who need mortgage lenders, and the very best mortgage lender out there is Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They happen to be my sponsor. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian happen to be my friends. I also did my mortgage with them when I moved back to the Beltway in 2016 from California. So I recommend andrewandtodd.com, having worked with them, having had them do my loan, and they did the loan for my kids. They did the loan for Dwayne. They've done the loan for a lot of Salem executives, and they're very good at it. But they can't do magic. They can do the best job possible. They can help you clean up your credit. They can help you figure out how much you can qualify for before you go in to look at houses. They can give you an approval letter. They can do all that kind of stuff, and they can put you in their system so that when interest rates drop, as is Donald Trump's objective, they'll call you back and you can refinance. 888-888-1172. Please do not just call the latest person you heard or a billboard. I have worked with Andrew and Todd for a decade, and I've known them for 20 years, and they've been sponsors forever. Just don't work with just anybody. A lot of fly-by-night people pop up and come and go, close up shop when interest rates go up, open up shop when interest rates start to fall. Not a good idea, especially with reverse mortgages. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian, andrewandtodd.com. But I'm interested by this story because The feds don't know what to do because they don't know what Congress is going to do. And until Congress does something, they don't know whether or not we're going to have an inflationary burst of deficit spending and higher debt. We have a $36 trillion national debt right now. We pay interest on that, getting to be a lot. So I know that the budget they're going to agree to is going to have red ink in it. But we need new revenue. Tomorrow I have a column in Fox News with 4 places to get revenue. Number 1, open up a one-time 2025 window on conversions of IRA and 401k to Roth IRAs and pay a flat tax on it. I don't know what that flat tax should be. Maybe it should be 10%. Maybe it should be 15%. It should be the present discounted value of the future taxation on the trillions and trillions of dollars that are in the retirement accounts, which might take 40 or 50 years to come out. It could be a long time till we tax that money because Americans are thrifty and they have IRAs and they have 401ks. A Roth IRA is money that you put into the Roth IRA, but it's taxed beforehand, so it's never taxed again. It grows tax-free. That's the best investment anyone can make. But a lot of people have 401ks, 403s, they have IRAs, and they'd love to get that money out and put it into a Roth IRA doing what is known as a conversion. Conversions are complicated because it depends on your present tax rate, what your future tax rate will be. Well, they'll get a tidal wave of money off of a one-time window at a lower rate right now so that people who are 62 and older can pull all their money out, they don't want to spend it. They want to put it into a Roth IRA so it can grow tax-free, and the government would reap a windfall, and that windfall can allow Donald Trump to do a lot. Number 2, I'm giving you tomorrow's column today. We need to tax dope and gambling. Make sin taxes great again. Now, a lot of states don't allow the sale of legal marijuana, but most states do. It's a booming business. Colorado, California, other places. People want edibles, people want to smoke weed, whatever. I think it's bad. It was a bad idea. It's bad for kids. It's much worse than it used to be. But if we're going to sell it, let's tax it. And let's tax it for the feds first, and maybe even preempt state taxation so they don't have an incentive to legalize it because they have big bureaucracies to feed. Gambling online is a nightmare. It's going to make a lot of people addicts. And then finally, let's sell federal land. Let's sell federal spectrum. Let's reap a lot of revenue without raising income taxes. Joined by Mary Catherine Ham, host of Getting Hammered. And I'm wondering, MKH, do you recognize the music?
I do, but I was trying to place it and I couldn't exactly.
It is the theme song to Gremlins. Because I was going up the Implacable Hill today, and I heard that you took a Gremlins lunchbox to kindergarten. What are you trying to get thrown out on the first day?
I was sending a signal. You don't mess with me. Day 1.
My
5-year-old with a Gremlins lunchbox.
I would like to know if you still have that. Kate would like that make box. Genghis Kate would really be comfortable with a Gremlins lunchbox, I think.
I'm sure she would. I sadly do not have that relic anymore.
Oh, Mary Catherine, you also implied, though you did not assert, that the Northgate Mall in North Carolina was the original mall. I believe it is the Eastwood Mall in Niles, Ohio, although there are people in Edina who say it's the Southdale Mall. I believe Southdale and Northgate were shopping centers that were then enclosed, but the Eastwood Mall was actually built from the ground up as an enclosed mall. Just want you to know your facts.
Well, you will have to talk to Vic about this because he literally read the book on the malls, and that's where he gleaned this information, which I did not know about my hometown mall until he told me. So
well, I am just correcting the record. I have one more correction before we get to serious stuff. You said we live in a safer America. I would like to acquaint you with teenage boys on motorized bikes. How are you familiar with them?
I am familiar with it in theory, yes.
All right. I have to go to a certain shopping center on a regular basis all the time, which is next to a high school. And boys 13 to 15 and a half, whenever they can start to drive, are on motorized bikes going 40, 45 miles per hour in parking lots, which I can dodge. But there are toddlers in the parking lot, and the miles per hour are 5 miles. So when you let little, baby, I guess it's not little. It's not one of your two smalls. It's one of your two bigs. You let them walk home, 0.7 miles, and I approve. I used to walk a mile and a half home from St. Mary's in Warren every day unless it was lightning. I approve of that, but I don't think it's safer. I think it's more dangerous because people are looking at their cell phones, they're smoking dope, and they're riding these crazy bicycles.
I do not have the bicycle issue in my neighborhood. I might evaluate differently if I did. But I think largely, certainly in places where moms might send their kids to walk half a mile, compared to the 80s in Durham, North Carolina, I'm on safer ground.
You know, I'm going to have a longer debate with you about this because I was talking about this with the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt last night. I worry that our grandchildren might not grow up in as safe era as we did. Your era is different from mine, which are the 60s, and you're the 80s.
Right.
And so it's different eras completely, but just physical safety. There are crazy people out there with cell phones, dope, and bicycles that make me nervous. Let's get to the serious stuff. You have been exercised, as have I, over a series of actions by Team Biden, taken in the name of a president who was infirm and probably incompetent, including the commutation of the murderer of a mom and a son who was a witness to his drug dealings for which he was convicted. And yesterday we learned about the condom deal. There's some pushback that that's not true, but David Friedman said it was true. Let's take it as a given. I think this is a big scandal. Do you?
Yeah, look, I think this is the biggest scandal maybe of my life in presidential politics, that this guy wasn't with it for 3 to 4 years, and that many, many people had a part in covering it up, much of the press corps that had access to him doing the same. And the idea that he is, look, the president does have broad pardoning powers. You know who doesn't? His staff, nonprofits aligned with the White House, they don't have broad pardoning powers. So it is hugely problematic to the point of constitutional crisis to have a guy maybe signing things, but probably not knowing what he's signing and maybe not actually physically signing them. We don't know what he was up to. I don't know when we'll get the tell-all on this. I don't know which journalist who did have access and has, sort of good relationships with these folks could wheedle this out of them for a real version of what happened over the last 4 years. But it's astounding to me that people aren't more upset about it, including the press corps. I know I shouldn't be surprised, but amazing.
I'm upset by it. I don't know what to do about it because the executive office of the president is immune from congressional scrutiny. That's the one place where the court's been pretty conclusive in its rulings on you cannot subpoena the president's lawyer, you cannot subpoena the president's chief of staff, conversations are confidential. Would you want to have hearings into this? Do you want Congress to try and figure out when did they know the president didn't know anything and when did they know it? When did they say it? And what did they do when they knew it?
What I want is to figure out how not to let this happen again.
Exactly.
And part of that is accountability. And I think maybe one of the answers is in an indirect way, if you can't get to hearings and accountability that way, because I do worry also about the Trump administration, which obviously is hit the ground running, to be looking backward in that way and putting too much emphasis in that area might be problematic for them and their momentum and what they actually want to get done in 4 years. So maybe part of the way you deal with this is that you do shake up the press room, that you do take those chairs away from people who hid this thing from the American people for so long, that they pay a price in that way for not being straight with people. So you're sort of changing the paradigm so that this cannot happen in the future. But I don't know, is there a way to test the legality of some of these things that were done? Who knows, by the president? Probably not. The president by committee seems like a real big problem that we should not encounter again.
The last time we ran into this, we got an amendment to the Constitution after the Edith Wilson and FDR fiascos where presidents were incapacitated. I got to go to a break, Mary Catherine. Do I have you for an extra few minutes today? Because it was a great Getting Hammered episode today. Absolutely fabulous.
Thanks.
And we haven't even talked about inappropriate things for children and other people. So don't go anywhere. I'm never going to watch the Squid Games. Never going to do it. But Mary Catherine Ham and Vic Madditz are, of course, aficionados of the Squid Games. And I'm going to come back and talk about that and about the time I mistakenly took my 10 and 13-year-old boys to see Team America thinking it was a cartoon, and it wasn't. So parents make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up about it. Mary Catherine Ham, host of Getting Hammered, which she co-hosts along with Vic Mattis, and it makes me laugh, and it's your morning show for any time of the day, and it's really fun. And they do the news. Some days they say they're going to do a lightning round on the news, and then they don't get the news for 30 minutes, like today. But, Mary Catherine, you said during today's podcast, there was an old Mary Catherine Ham version who would have said, oh, well, maybe you don't have the authority. What were you mean? I think there's actually a lot of old versions of people running around that they want to forget, but you're at least owning it, and I own it too. What do you mean by that?
No, so I was talking about the Colombia deal where the president dashes off, proposed public policy on Truth Social, and he's like, here's the tariffs I'm going to impose on you. Here's what I'm going to do to diplomats. Here's what I'm going to do to your economy if you don't take back your plane full of criminal aliens that we just deported to Colombia. I think there is an old version of Mary Catherine who has since gone through an arc and many different iterations of the American electorate's takes on things that would have said, that seems very rash. I don't know if the president should be doing that. This is not the proper channels. And is this just a bad way of doing business? New Mary Catherine, having been through those arcs, though I remain a conservative who wants people to stay within the bounds and the power of that the Constitution grants them, is like, I don't know, that was pretty efficient, and we don't really need a blue ribbon panel from the State Department and its dubious actors to put together a plan for basically caving to Colombia. That's not what we need to do as America. As America, if our president says we have American power, these are the things we can do, you get results, and then, by the way, you get deterrence against a bunch of other countries who will now accept these flights. I'm not mad about it.
I'm not either, but I'm still the same old Hugh. But I think there are a lot of new versions of whoever they were. I'm also, by the way, as you said, you're 90% with Trump. I'm actually 95%. I don't like pulling security details from people on the Iranian hit list, including Mark Milley and others. You can absolutely run the investigation of whether or not he ought to lose a star in retirement, and I don't know what the answer is going to be. But I don't want to pull. If people on the Iran hit list, do you want them to have security, Mary Catherine?
Yeah, I think I'm basically in agreement with them having security. There are certain people, I think security can be evaluated as a public servant once you've left the public sphere. But like, these are folks who stood up partly, at least with Pompeo, for Trump's policies, right? And that's why they've been targeted. And I agree with you about having an investigation of Milley. I don't have an issue with that either.
Mary Catherine, we were talking about inappropriate content and what is and isn't. And as you get older, nothing really offends. But I warn everyone about what might offend. Seth Mandel on his podcast said, Tires is the funniest thing he's ever seen. So I had the fetching Mrs. Hewitt watch it with me, and she about had a stroke because it was so vulgar. It's funny, but it's Shane Gillis, so it's not funny to her. We don't have a rating system. I just say everything's NC. Like, there's a bunch of shows that are outside of the norms of my age and your age. Right. What do you think? How do we tell people? What should we do about this?
Yeah, first of all, I think I would probably like Tires because I'm pro bro humor in general, so I'll try it out. I think one of the things that's tough about being a modern media consumer, whether it's politics or entertainment, is that, it takes a lot of work to sift through a bunch more options and research about those options to figure out what is going to work for you and your family. So I think I do probably much more screening of movies and TV content for my kids than my parents did for me, partly because there are messages that my parents would never have even anticipated or imagined in the 80s and 90s that show up in all sorts of stuff now. And the same goes for stuff that I consume myself. I'm not that I'm shielding myself from anything. I'm just basically trying to spend my time on something worthwhile. But I do a lot of reading of reviews and checking of websites to see if I can figure out what works for us. And there is a lot of wholesome stuff out there, actually. A lot of it comes from foreign countries. The reality shows from Korea and Britain in particular, much more wholesome than ours. And I enjoy them.
I want to say there's so much media that we need editors of media. Dwayne has a new podcast, Dwayne's World, by the way, which I listen to all the time, and I want to tell people is a completely PG deal. Now, you used a bad word today at one point. So did you get a PG-13 on your podcast today?
I mean, I think Look, it's a 1987 PG. Okay, let's use the old standards. Have you watched PG and PG-13 movies from the 80s?
No.
Because woo, those ratings were sometimes risque. No, I do occasionally drop a bad word on the podcast, and I don't feel great about it, but sometimes I feel that it is warranted.
Well, when you reserve the heavy ammunition for the occasional use, it actually makes an impact, which is why
Yes.
some of my other podcasts really ought to throttle it back a little bit so that they can make an impact when they otherwise use it. Mary Catherine Ham, thank you for the extra time today. Follow her on X at MKHammer, and by all means, like and subscribe, Getting Hammered, and her new podcast, Normally. Breaking headline, former Senator Bob Menendez has been sentenced to 11 years in prison in the Gold Bars case. Talk about that and many other things. Victor Davis Hanson returns, eminent military historian and classicist, old friend of the program. It is good to see you again, Victor. How are you?
Very good. Same here, you. Good to see you.
What do you make of the sentencing of Menendez and the message that Americans are going to take away from that?
I think he pressed his luck one too many times. He skirted the law, as you know, and he's been in trouble for years. And I think their attitude's going to be just desserts. And they hope it serves as a deterrent for people like him.
I agree. Now, Philip Klein of National Review wrote a column today about the brokenness of elites, that a lot of the pro-Trump movement, and it's growing, he's at 57 or higher percent approval right now, is because Americans center-right, and conservative have concluded the government's just broken at every level, and it's corrupt at many levels. Do you think that in part explains Trump's triumph in 2024?
Yeah, I do. Part of it was the empathy for what he went through, and that was a symptom of the corruption. The lawfare, five jurisdictions, 91 pseudo felony counts, trying to get him off the ballot in 16 states, impeaching him twice, trying him as a private citizen, all of that. People just thought, these people are obsessed and they're using the government to go after someone who, if he just said he wasn't going to run for president, they wouldn't have done it. And they wouldn't ever use those same indictments against anybody else. They were sort of suspect. And then, of course, it was the weakness of Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. Those were two of the worst candidates we've seen. So he was a beneficiary of that. But what they did to him boomerang, put it that way. People got sick
mildly.
of it.
Now,
Yeah.
I was just talking with Mary Catherine Ham. I want to ask you, the infirmity of Joe Biden was well known, but his mental incapacity was not understood to be as significant as it was. It's a scandal of incredible size. Is there any way to investigate it given the president's constitutional authority and separation of his branch from the Congress?
I don't know, but a lot of people have wondered about that because there were, of course, executive orders he signed, bills he signed into law that seemed, in retrospect, to have been made when he was non compos mentis, and yet people who knowingly knew that, and yet they conspired to disguise that fact. And the locus classicus of that, of course, was when Speaker Johnson said that he talked to the president himself and said, "Why did you delay or put on hold these LNG terminals in Louisiana?" And he said, "I have no memory of it. I didn't know I did it." And that does suggest some type of fraud. If anybody wanted to investigate that further, that the president of the United States says he signed a bill of which he had no idea that he had done that, and yet it had enormous importance.
There are 8,500 commutations and pardons which occurred in the last 3 months when his incompetence is at its most severe, however severe that might have been. Some of those are just genuinely shocking. He pardoned or commuted, actually, the sentence of a murderer who killed a witness and her child in a drug trafficking case. And that's just the one that stuns most people. We can't revoke that. The pardon power and the commutation power is absolutes in the Constitution, black letter law. But should we investigate it? And if so, do you think Congress has a constitutional ability to do so?
Well, I think they do. Even with the 1,500 that Trump pardoned, if you look at the last 5 presidencies, Joe Biden pardoned more than all 5 combined. And with the 2,000 from Bill Clinton, which was until then the high, in the modern period. They pardoned over 10,000 people, Clinton, uh, and then Biden, and even with Donald Trump, as I said, he and George Bush had about 2,000. So there was a great asymmetry, and it seems to be more of a democratic phenomenon, at least in the modern period. And I think they're going to have to check. I think I don't know what the constitutionality of it. You know better than that as a legal mind, but it seems to me that it's been abused, abused, abused. It's got to stop.
I agree, and I don't know how to do it though. I don't. Sometimes it's okay to say I just don't know. Now, Victor Davis
Yeah.
Hanson, when you were a young professor, I was a young lawyer in the federal government, and I ended up running OPM because everybody else left in the Reagan years, and so I know a lot about the Federal Civil Service Reform Act of 1978. But it's been more than 30 years. I don't have any problem with Donald Trump firing 12 lawyers who tried to prosecute him. They ought to have They ought to have quit before they went to work for Jack Smith because his appointment was unconstitutional. What do you think ought to be? I don't know what the rules are now because rules and laws change, but what do you think ought to be the rule concerning the 2 million federal employees in the executive branch?
Well, there has to be some that are civil service, but they have abused that because it is a phenomenon that when Barack Obama came in, he fired vast numbers of people. And I can say from personal experiences, I was a non-political appointee on, of all commissions, the American Battlefield Monuments
Oh,
Commission.
that's the
which is
best commission.
sort
That's the
it
best
is.
commission.
It is, and my job was to be a custodian of our dead overseas, 50% of which of all dead in our wars are buried there. And I never billed it. I would go on a tour, I'd go on a trip, and I would always go visit these and talk with the custodians there. I never even billed the government. And yet when Barack Obama came in, I got a letter saying you will surrender your diplomatic passport, your commission immediately within 10 days. And then he left it open for almost a year until he appointed Max Cleland. My point is that Donald Trump is bringing us back to normalcy, but because we have been accustomed to what the left has done, it seems like suddenly they feel, well, you're supposed to play by the Marquess of Queensberry rules, and we can do whatever you want. You're not supposed to do what we do. And yet, when you try to correct what they do, you consider a radical because they were so off the scale. Same thing with the border. They're talking about the cost of deporting people, but what was the cost of letting 12 million people in and the havoc they wrecked? So a lot of this is all connected, and I think people have to take a deep breath and say, you know what, it's going to be costly to undo the damage and the precedents that they inspired and established. I think a lot of it is anger that they realize now that they did certain things with the executive orders, with the border, that they never thought would be used by a president to enact policies that had public support. They abused the system because they didn't have public support. But Donald Trump is saying, well, since you established these precedents, I'm going to use it to do things that people want. And now they're going crazy and they feel that they empowered Trump in a way they never thought possible. They thought he was going to be like George Bush or Romney or McCain or Bob Dole, and they didn't understand that he's a different sort of person.
Now, Victor Davis Hanson, this is a question. We're going to go into the break and then bring you back as well and talk during the break. It's a big question. It's a theoretical one. The civil service dates to the late 1800s. The Pendleton Act. Teddy Roosevelt, I think, was the first civil service commissioner, and now it's 2 million people. And you can barely budget. And you cannot move the federal civil service but an inch at a time. And I ran it for 3 years. I know what I'm talking about. I know the laws are complex. But the Congress can, as part of the Budget Act, say, notwithstanding any other law, including the Federal Civil Service Reform Act of 1978, the president shall have the authority to reduce the federal employment ranks by 20%. It can do that. No questions asked. Anybody he wants. Should the Congress do something like that?
Absolutely. I wrote a book called The Dying Citizen. I had a chapter called The Unelected. And they are judge, jury, and executioner on these. And many of these bureaus, especially the EPA people, they interpret and use and exercise the law in a way that the framers of that law never intended. That's what's really disturbing. They become evolutionaries. They take a law and then they think, well, all of the elected officials are transitory and we know the law better than they do, and they're going to come and go. We're here permanently, and we're going to go after somebody, and they'll have enormous legal expenses even if we're in the wrong. They're not accountable. So I feel that part of that's because of the size and the arrogance and the compensation. So anything that can reduce the size and the nature of the government, permanent government, I think is salutary.
And do we want more political appointees who have set terms? You come in with a president and you leave with a president?
I kind of like the idea of amateurism, because I think a lot of these people master the arcane nature of their offices, and then they just have contempt for elected officials who are their overseers, because they think they don't know as much, and they don't know as much because they have taken the legislation and expanded to such a great degree that the lawmakers never even knew what they were, basically what would be the result of their passing this law. My famous, very quickly, is the Inland Waters Way. They come into California on a farm and they say this pond that filled up after a rain is an inland waterway.
Victor, the fires in Los Angeles were terrible. And I grieve for the people who lost everything and the loss of life. It is a monument to government incompetence. The fire hydrants did not work. There's no getting around that. Now, Donald Trump knows the Delta smelt and the Chinook salmon are screwing up water supplies to the Central Valley, and those are two different issues. But in a way, it's all about the California dysfunction. I think the president is right to lump it all together. Do you?
Absolutely. And the California Water Project and the Central Valley Project, the federal and state, they were designed to send water to 1/3 of the state, and from the area where 2/3 of the precipitation falls. And Gavin Newsom told a great untruth when he said the reservoirs are full. What he meant was they're 60% full because we anticipate a big snowmelt, and that's where we are at this time of the year. But we're not anticipating a big snowmelt. We're in a drought condition, so they could be much fuller. And it was a systems breakdown, from timber management to driving out the insurance industry by prescribing how much they could charge, which was unrealistic. They were losing $1.50 for every dollar in premium. And then you had the mayor, not only in Uganda, we had the deputy mayor that she appointed basically under veritable house arrest for phoning in a bomb threat to the city council, allegedly. And then we had, of course, Miss Quiones, who came from a checkered career at PG&E, and she didn't have any idea that the reservoir was still 117 million gallons. It was not full because of a minor tear in the cover. It was just a complete systems breakdown, and it was partly the green obsessions here, partly the anti-modernism of the whole state. They feel they want to go back in the 19th century, and partly it was the DEI, and they all know that. And everybody knows it, and the people who voted for it know it. And just the $64,000 question to you is, are people just angry and blowing off steam, or does this a fundamental shift in the way that they look at politics and they won't elect these people? But I'm not.
Well, when
I'm
the
not
president
confident.
brought up changing the voting rules in California, he's actually getting to the root of the problem, which is it is legal to harvest votes. The SEIU is very good at it. The Republicans are not so good at it. There's a machine, the California Teachers Association, the prison guards, the tribes, they run the machine. You've got to change the basic rules to change the machine. But my God, not since Pete Wilson have we had a competent governor. It's been that long. Arnold wasn't competent.
No, it wasn't. And we're on the fume. We're basically living on the fumes, and they're very scant now, but of 24 years of Ronald Reagan, Pete Wilson, and earlier George Dugmation. They were all good governors. They really created the infrastructure that we've abused. And I don't know, we had 3 congressional seats, Steele, and here in the San Joaquin Valley, Duarte and Garcia, or he was near Tehachapi. They all won on election day. Yeah, everybody knew he was in Lancaster area. Everybody knew that they were great Congress people. They were essential to the Republican majority. If they were in there right now, we wouldn't have a lot of these problems.
Agreed.
And yet, on election day, we all said, how much did they win by? I hope they won by 4 or 5%.
The breakdown in California elections, he pointed out that 3 Republican congressmen, incumbents, Garcia, Michelle Steele, Michael Garcia, Michelle Steele, and Duarte in the Central Valley, all were leading by a lot. But they ended up losing because votes show up 3 days after the election, but they're postmarked on the day of election. Other votes are cured. It's actually kind of legal to cheat in an old-fashioned way in California. And Victor, I don't think you can fix the state. I'm no longer a Californian. It's not my problem. I'm a Virginian who comes out here to teach every other year. What do you think? Can this state be fixed?
Well, not unless they change. The only hope that I have is the Hispanic population, which is largely Mexican American, flip 5 counties, including my own, Fresno County. And they are starting to see that they cannot afford, as an aspiring middle class population that's coming into its own. They cannot afford the gas, they cannot afford the electricity prices, they cannot afford the crime, the poor infrastructure, and the poor schools. And they're starting to rebel. And I don't know how long or how big that rebellion, but that will help. And then the fire was the real first time that a whole constituency suffered the consequences of their ideology. Usually they're exempt because of their zip code or their money or their influence. Not this time. And they are still angry at Gavin Newsom. So maybe we've got to peak woke, peak Green New Deal, peak all of this craziness. And California will become a two-party system. I mean, we have super majorities of Democrats. We only have, I think it's 9 congressional seats of 52, not one state officer. 14 out of 15 on the city council were Democrats. So it was a Democratic project, is what I'm trying to say. All of this.
And you're saying very well. And the Overton window of what they will do is move sharply to the left. Victor, in terms of, this is a scary thought. I had this conversation around our dining room table with a half dozen people who were dinner guests. What would happen if we actually had a significant earthquake in either Southern or Northern California? I mean, a 7.5, a Santa. We saw what happened in the fires. Everything broke down. What do you think would happen in LA if there was actually the big one happen?
Oh, I'd be very scared. I mean, we had the Loma Linda, but we had a different governance. So they rushed into, they built the clover leaves and rebuilt it. It wouldn't happen. It would not. Because I'm saying that because I live 6 miles from what I call Stonehenge, and that is the overpasses on the high-speed rail from Bakersfield to Merced. It's been 15 years. My road was shut down for 6 years, and they've covered with graffiti $18 billion. It's going to be up to 150, and they haven't laid 1 foot of track yet. And it's a complete disaster. And when I see them work and I see the eminent domain and the law, it was a complete catastrophe. And that's how they're going to approach public works. And then finally, very quickly, we voted $7.5 billion to build reservoirs. Had we built the Sites Reservoir, the Los Banos Grandes, Temperance Flat, all easy, low elevation for flood years, 6 million acre feet of water. What did we do? We didn't build one, even though the voters voted. And he took $300 million, Newsom, and he blew up 4 dams on the Klamath River. That was adding insult to injury. 4 dams, 80,000 homes on clean hydroelectric power, recreation, flood control, irrigation, just blew them up.
I want the audience to know that before Victor Davis Hanson was one of the country's eminent military historians, one of their eminent classicists, he was and remains a farmer, and he's in the Central Valley. So Donald Trump comes out and says to Gavin Newsom, I'm not sending aid for anything till you fix the California Water Project and get water to the Central Valley. Now, we're talking to Fresno right now, and we're talking to Los Angeles right now. It's different from the fire hydrants not having water, but it's all part of the problem. Do you think Donald Trump can get this fixed? Because it's a nightmare. It's an absolute ridiculous injury to the American prosperity and dream to deny water to the Central Valley, the breadbasket of America, in order to save the Delta smelt, which is not a native species, or the Chinook salmon, which will do fine if they can't swim in the Delta like they'd like to. Do you think Trump will get it done?
Well, the Central Valley Project shares the Delta bypass and with the California State Project. So he has a 50% input. and he has mechanisms that he did it before. He had the pumps turned on. That whole Sacramento tributary system, it gets into the delta, and then we never built the peripheral canal, so it has to be pumped back into the aqueduct, and then it's been tapped to, now it's San Jose lateral, then San Luis Obispo, then Santa Barbara, then it's pumped over into LA, and it's an increasingly small. I mean, they count on Colorado River, they count on Owens Valley, but they need the aqueduct in LA as well. But he just announced, he said everything was great. I'm not diverting water. He just announced that all farmers on the west side of the Central Valley will get 10% of their contracted water.
You mean Gavin Newsom?
Yes, that's what he said. 10% of what they have had contractual arrangements since 1962. 10%, and everybody said, well, what are you doing with the water? He never says where the water is coming into the delta and how much is going out. He always says the reservoirs are full, when in fact we had a very wet October, November, and that they filled up naturally, and he's not added anything to them, and the water is, as we speak, going out to the delta. And we know that 35 municipal waste plants on the San Francisco Bay contribute a lot of deoxygenation that hurts the smelt, but mostly it's an invasive species, the striped bass, that eats them. They love them, and so they've never really told us why this little canary in the mine fish is dwindling, because really it's not about the delta smelt. It's about this romantic, hyper extremist green idea that there was once 1850 salmon and it was a beautiful California until these evil people came. And it's all a project of the coastal elite that has so much money that they feel that they never suffer the consequence. It's always people in Bakersfield or Fresno or Merced or the Inland Empire that deals with the catastrophe.
Or as you said, the rising middle class of Latinos, and they're mostly Mexican Americans, but there are lots of other varieties of Latino American, and they're getting crushed. Victor, I filled up my car yesterday because I have to drive back and forth to law school, and it was $85 because California costs much more than anybody else. I don't know how people in California make it. I really don't. And so last minute to you, Lonnie Chen lost by 1 million votes statewide, best Republican candidate we've run since Pete Wilson. Do you think anyone can actually win in this state in 2026 who isn't a left-wing Democrat?
Well, I think Kevin McCarthy, somebody like that from the Valley that had broad support and also if we had a charismatic Latino contractor, builder, I know so many of them that are so successful in private enterprise. If one of them stepped up, I think they could win. I think people do not want what we have now. It's a dysfunctional state. It's propped up by Silicon. And the other thing we didn't mention very quickly, is we don't know the role of this $9 trillion of market capitalization. So it seems like a lot of the Silicon Valley money thinks we can't do business here. We've got to look for an alternative. And we saw that in the presidential race.
Yeah, it's leaving. Yeah. Elon Musk is the canary in the coal mine. Victor Davis Hanson, it is great to see you again. Follow Victor online at VD Hanson on X and his podcast and read his books. So good to have you back. Victor Davis Hanson will be a regular on the afternoon edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Temporarily lost my earpiece there, which is always unfortunate when you're trying to do a radio and television show, but I got it back. If you haven't heard Victor Davis Hanson before, I'm so glad he's back. Dwayne and I were talking during the break. He was almost a weekly and certainly a monthly guest from 2000 until 2016, when I left California, moved back to Virginia, and took over the morning drive slot for the Salem media. And 6 to 9 in the morning is a great time for the morning if you're on the East Coast Drive. But your guests who live in California don't really want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning and do television and radio with me. So VDH would occasionally pre-tape something, but a breaking news, Bob Menendez just got sent away for 11 years. That wasn't possible for so long, and we're going to have VDH on a lot because there are a few people as wise and as experienced in everything as Victor. So look forward to that. Let me tell you about our friends who've been here before and after I did morning drive in the East. Now I'm doing afternoon drive in the East, which is on from 12 to 3 in the West. And it is our friends at Job Creators Network. and they have a brand new project. And I'm going to tell you about it every day in different hours, so I get everyone to do this. EducationFreedomUSA.com. EducationFreedomUSA.com. The school choice movement has taken off. It has reached its logical conclusion in Arizona. Now, there are variations. Florida has a variation. West Virginia has a variation. Iowa, Ohio, they have their own deal. Texas is getting ready to do one. There are other states that have a variety of school choice, universal school choice. Every student eligible for a voucher that will allow them to go to the school of their choice is in Arizona, which is another reason people are leaving California. Job Creators Network does not want there to be winners and losers because some states are run by their teachers' unions and won't allow vouchers, which are manifestly true and good, manifestly necessary to bring competition and education back, especially to recent arrivals, especially to migrants and the children of migrants. We have to bring people into good schools and do what America always did through its public school system, but doesn't anymore, and increasingly replaces Americanization with ideologicalization of the left. So EducationFreedomUSA.com is where the Job Creators Network is pulling everything. And I need you to go there, visit there, and be a part of EducationFreedomNetwork.com. Tom Homan got stopped by a nosy reporter. And again, Homan and Stephen Miller, do not expect to get him off his message. Do not expect anything but the truth. Here is Border Czar Homan, cut number 17.
Are you treating migrants humanely?
Yes.
But there's been reports of them on planes with no water,
That was a bunch of
complaining.
crap. That was a bunch of crap.
What do you mean a bunch of crap?
ICE detention facilities have the highest detention standards in the industry. Any of the ICE standards, our detention standards are higher than any state or federal or local facility in the nation, in the world. Someone should go to the ICE website, look at PBNDS 11, performance-based detention standards, and look at our detention standards, highest in the industry.
But are you sure you're only getting illegal criminal migrants? I mean, there were some pictures over the weekend of people that claim to be students, Brazilian students, who were showing examples of bruises on their arms from American deportation flights.
That's ridiculous, but if they want to make a complaint, we investigate it.
But your assurance is what?
The men and women at ICE are professionals. We do this for a living. And I can tell you, I ran ICE for years. I was the first director of ICE came up through the ranks. Again, these men and women are professional, highest detention standards in the industry. We take care of these people. But we're going to enforce the law, and we're not going to apologize for doing it.
Tom
And
Homan.
you're going to do it in a sort of...
some British reporter comes in. What? You bruised the arm of a Brazilian student who shouldn't have been here. Homan says that's ridiculous. But if he wants to file a complaint, fine. You know where that complaint's going. If you're here illegally, you are, and don't be near a criminal, because they're going after the criminals for whom there is a deportation order. They've already gone through the entire process, and they've been ordered removed by an immigration judge. There are 1.2 to 1.4 million of those people. ICE is going for them first. But if you're next to them, if you're illegal, alien, criminal adjacent, and you're in the country illegally, you're in harm's way. Get away from them if you don't want to tangle with ICE. It's that simple. Boy, the messaging is great. It's Wednesday. That means the Yinzer Report. Selena Zito is with me. Hello, Selena. How are you?
Hello, Sunshine. How are you?
I am great. I want to know, just a very open field question. What do you make of the first 10 days of the golden age of America under Donald Trump?
Well, I think that maybe it was the best thing that ever happened for the country and also Trump that he lost in 2020, because it has given him a perspective and a purpose to do it the way he understands it can be done. And I think we're seeing the benefit of that. You know, oftentimes think about your personal life, think about your professional life, the things that have set you back, the things you have not gotten, right? Usually those are the things where you have you learn the biggest lesson from. And I think sometimes losing makes you better at what you do. And I think that this is the case. And also it makes you realize, I think the past 4 years have been very instructive for the American people to understand why far leftism doesn't work in governing. You know, Republicans can say it over and over again, but the proof now has been in the pudding. You have 4 years to look back on and say, look, we were right. It doesn't work. The proof is right there. We have
Selena,
the evidence in the fentanyl.
I don't think
Yeah.
you meant it, but when you said losing makes you better, you really hurt every Cleveland Browns fan out there, because that's not true.
Well, it's not been the case for the past, I don't know, 18 seasons for the Steelers either. So,
Or the Pirates. Okay. Let me ask you about.
Pirates.
Let me ask you about the deportations. We have elite media that are wringing their hands. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who's opposed to deporting people who have committed a crime and have gone through the process and have a deportation order against them. Do you?
No, I mean, all you have to do is listen to what the mayor of Detroit said. Of course, we want to be a welcoming city. However, we do not want to be a welcoming city to illegal people that are here illegally, in particular, the people that are here illegally that commit crimes. You saw this the same with John Fetterman. He has said that over and over again. He's told me we have basically brought in the population of the city of Pittsburgh illegally into the country, and how do we have the services to sustain that? He said we don't. And you don't want the criminal element in. Obviously, you don't want the criminal element if they came from Mars.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about Mars. They might have that Mars. Remember Mars Invasion with the death ray and the little green men? Mars attacks.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
Yeah,
Let me ask you about Tony Dungy. The word is out today that the native of Jackson, Michigan, that state up north, is thinking about running for the open Senate seat. Tony Dungy is a very outspoken evangelical Christian. Of course, he's a black man.
Yep.
He did play for the Steelers. We got that. There's a dark mark there. But what do you think about Tony Dungy running for Senate?
He is one of my favorite people in terms of following on Twitter. He's very aspirational. He is very thoughtful. He certainly has experiences highs and lows, and those are the kinds of people you want in governing. They know how to manage situations, good things and bad things. He's done that in his personal life and in his career. I can't see why that would be a bad idea.
I think it would be now he's 70 years old, and that's like being like a rookie in the Senate sometimes. But if you go for one term, maybe even 2 to 82, it would be fabulous. And I think he would have a cross-the-aisle appeal in that state up north. You go there a lot more than I do. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he would definitely have appeal. I think he would be a great candidate. I think, who else I think would be a great candidate up there? John James. He's in Congress right now. People think the bench isn't all that good for the Republicans. I would argue you just don't know what the bench is, because there's a lot of really innovative, interesting, outside the norms that are that want to run and want to do service for their state or for their country, and I think if anything if we've learned anything from 2024, and there's a lot of evidence that a lot of reporters and Democrats haven't, and some Republicans too, is that anything can happen, and people are willing. The coalition is so broadly changed within the Republican Party, and I oftentimes don't think that Republicans understand that, as not elected Republicans, and I think there's room for lots of different people to run.
Quick exit question, Selena. You know Margaret Brennan. I know Margaret Brennan a little bit. You've been on Face the Nation. I've been on Face the Nation. She's been a guest on this show. How many times is she going to step on the rake with J.D. Vance? I mean, she did it again this weekend, and J.D. just owned her. He doesn't want to, but when she says something like, Alabama and Kentucky are poor and dumb, that's a paraphrase, J.D.'s not having it. What do you think? Is she going to learn?
clearly no. That was very disappointing. Not only did she mention states below the Mason-Dixon line as though they are less intelligent and capable, she said it was dripping with disdain. Like, you can't even pretend that it wasn't. And the way she said Kentucky, like, are you serious? I mean, you're going to talk about a state with that much disdain? Look, anybody that's covered any natural disaster knows that these state governments have these core staging operations. They have multiple resources at their hands, and they're the first one on the job. The state officials. And I have seen that firsthand in numerous flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes. Those are the people on the ground that are there and they're ready.
They're there first, and Team Rubicon is second. When FEMA shows up, not always the greatest addition to the team. Sometimes good, not always great. Selena Zito can be found at selenazito.com, and you can follow her on X at Zito Selena, columnist for the Washington Examiner, and everywhere else that you look. Thank you, Selena. So happy to be back with my KRLA audience in Los Angeles, my KCBQ audience in San Diego, my affiliates in the Central Valley, in Fresno, and Bakersfield, and Ventura, up in San Francisco, and places north. I love California. I lived there 1978 to early 1980, and I came back in 1989, and I stayed till the end of 2015. Love California. Love returning to visit when I teach. Don't miss paying the taxes. Do not miss the dysfunction. Worry greatly about what happens to the state. If you missed Victor Davis Hanson talking to me today, go to my YouTube channel and find it. Even if you don't watch YouTube, listen to that. VDH is back. We're happy. Now, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, signed the Laken-Riley Act today, cut number 6.
But to me, this was the worst of all. It's a landmark law that we're doing today. It's going to save countless innocent American lives. I want to thank every House Republican, every Senate Republican, as well as the 12 Senate Democrats and the 48 House Democrats who voted to pass this vitally important bill, and many of them are with us today, and I really do appreciate it. And I very much especially appreciate the bipartisan support. The Democrats, really a big percentage of them came through, and plenty of them wanted to. They probably felt they couldn't, but they really wanted to. That they don't understand that would have made them a lot more popular, would have made them a lot better with their people. The ones that didn't.
Let's go to cut 16 because we don't have much time. The president at that meeting today with, it's not the press corps, it's not a press conference, not sure what it is, cut number 16.
And finally, I want to thank others who have also suffered this horrible scourge that goes on with young people being killed, and other people too, but young people, largely young people being killed. Thank you to Scott Root, the father of Sarah Root, killed at 21 years of age. Think of that, 21, by an illegal alien. Shouldn't have been in our country, would have never been in our country if we were here. What a sad thing. To each of these angel families, we love you and we stand in awe of your courage and your strength. It's the toughest thing anybody has to go through. Many of the angel families here today were betrayed by the last administration, and with this heartless and foolish and really very, very arrogant and very,
all right.
very...
It's really a wonderful thing, the person who's in charge of the illegal alien problem, because then people can get their voices heard, and the Commissioner of Agriculture, whoever that might be, I don't know, in Florida, is going to be very aware. How big is the problem in Florida, Speaker Perez?
It's huge. I think that the main thing we have to think of is how do we disincentivize illegal immigrants from coming to Florida? And we're noticing even in the last couple of days, the federal government has been in Florida and has already found several vehicles, several locations that have illegal immigrants that have been committing crimes, and they've turned them over to ICE. The problem that we've had hasn't been that the state of Florida hasn't been able to encounter the illegal aliens and put them in jail. The problem is ICE never came to pick them up, because that was the administration we were living under when President Biden was in office. Fortunately, we have one of the, if not the greatest president in the history of the United States on 1600 Pennsylvania Ave, and now they're picking them up.
Yeah.
They're going to deport them, as they should. They entered this country illegally.
Now, Danny,
We've done
that's
our
only
part.
one
Now we have a good
slice of
partner.
your pie. You get to be Speaker for 2 years. What's next on the Perez agenda that you hope to bring the party along with you to do?
I told you, Hugh, I'm gonna join your show, and we're gonna bring it to Miami. I'm gonna teach you how to make Cuban coffee, and we're gonna ride off into the sunset.
You know, you'll never get me there until the Browns have won a Super Bowl. So that's when I go to Miami to retire, is after the Browns win the Super Bowl, Danny Perez. But I'm serious. You've been waiting for a long time for this job. You got a big bill on immigration across the line. We'll see whether or not it becomes the perfect bill. The good must not be the enemy of the perfect. What else do you want to get done? I know school vouchers are down there, but are you going to expand that program?
Yeah, no. Where we're at right now is I want to make sure that our budget is lean. I'm concerned with some of the fat that we've had in our budget. We have a constitutional requirement to pass a balanced budget, but since I've been in the legislature, which is 7 years, we've increased our budget significantly. Of course, revenues have gone up. People have moved to our state, but just because revenues are going up doesn't mean increase of spending also has to partner it. So do we have too much fat in our budget? Are our agencies using taxpayer dollars properly? Is everyone that has access to the taxpayer dollars within government using it properly? That's our job. Where's the fat, and are we holding them accountable? That's the conversation that we're going to have this session. I want to get to it, but we got to solve for illegal immigration, which is what's been before us this week.
Next time you're on with me, Danny Perez, I want to talk about the insurance crisis that Florida mostly solved for hurricanes, and California now has to solve and has not even begun to solve for fires. And I mean, it's big out here. It was big in Florida. Am I right? You've mostly solved that? We got 30 seconds.
Yeah, I believe we've solved that. I mean, but look, nothing's perfect. We still have a lot of other issues to solve for you. And I think the most important part is that the Floridians understand that their elected officials are working hard at it, and we're proud of the work proudly produced thus far. It's why people are moving to the state of Florida. It's more of just staying consistent and making sure we get government out of people's lives.
Speaker Danny Perez of Florida, great to speak with you. Congratulations on becoming Speaker. Good luck on getting together with the governor, and we will talk again soon. Abe Greenwald is the executive editor of Commentary Magazine, one of the participants in the Daily in My Ear commentary podcast. He very rarely missed it. And now he's doing a commentary newsletter, which I have not yet subscribed to, but I will. Abe Greenwald, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Now, Abe, I want to explain to people the commentary podcast is kind of an orchestra. John Podhoretz conducts it. I think you're the cellist. I'm not going to say what the other instruments are, but occasionally you need a trumpet, meaning you got to go find a young lawyer, not me, I'm not auditioning, to occasionally bring some law in there. Because when you were talking about the lawyers at the DOJ today or yesterday, I thought to myself, they could really use a lawyer like Philip Howard or someone like that. Have you ever thought about adding a lawyer to the ensemble?
Well, we often have as a guest, but not as a regular member, Adam White, who's a terrific,
very good
constitutional scholar and scholar of the Supreme Court. And he immediately takes the conversations to places having to do with jurisprudence that are well beyond my head, but certainly clarifying.
Well, when you were talking about the DOJ lawyers who've been fired, Donald Trump has done a lot to federal civilian employees in the last 10 days. They got to go back to work. They got an offer to retire early. The inspectors generals were fired, and the DOJ 12 attorneys were fired. I'm going to focus on the last one. I used to run OPM under Ronald Reagan 30 plus years ago, and I was its general counsel before I ran it. So my immediate reaction is no one should talk about federal personnel because it's so damn complex nobody knows. But I know a little about DOJ because I was there as well. And they're not like regular civil servants. They're lawyers. You got more flexibility, but I honestly don't know if you can fire them. My question to you is, should they have ever accepted the job for Jack Smith in the first place? Because you can't make a DOJ lawyer become a special counsel, a deputy special counsel, or an assistant special counsel. You can't make them do it. Should they have accepted that gig?
Well, I mean, I suppose they should have gone with their individual consciences on that question. Would I have accepted that gig? No. Jack Smith was clearly eager to use whatever means were at hand to destroy Trump. And at least one case that he's brought up has been proven really flimsy. So, no, and obviously, you know, like so many of Trump's enemies since 2015, he has gone from hero to Nobody.
And that's where I want to pick up. On today's podcast, you said we need a limiting principle, and I believe you were quoting Noah Rothman, who's a frequent guest on the program as well, that what's the limiting principle on what Trump is doing to the federal civil service, and how do we de-escalate, or maybe are we escalating too fast? Here's my question. Do you think Donald Trump has to escalate in order to de-escalate after the last 4 years?
I think he's doing it tactically more than strategically. This is not what I don't think we're going to see for 4 years. I think the idea is to overwhelm his political enemies at the moment, throw so much at them that they can't even begin to push back on it. Although I have to say they have. But I think that's the idea. And to excite his base. The question of, can you break things in order to fix them? Or can you sow chaos in order to fix rotten institutions? That's where the line gets very blurry. You see today that Trump walked back his executive order on funding all sorts of domestic programs. I think that's a snag he hit here this first time around. I think we're starting to maybe get into the little too soon, too much too soon area, even though I understand the general approach and its efficacy.
You know, the DEI order was so very well drafted. I read the whole thing. I teach con law, and I said, this is a really nice piece of work. I think the order on discretionary spending actually lacked the word discretionary. And so it became a nightmare for them. So they got to go slow in order to go right. But I do think he needed to flood the zone in order to overwhelm initial opponents. And especially, and this is what I want to get to you about, the media is just trapped in narratives that they can't get out of, including, for example, we rarely saw a story about Judge Eileen Cannon, who was handling the Florida case against Trump, that did not mention she was a Trump appointee and was a relatively inexperienced federal judge. Doesn't matter the Constitution. You're a federal judge. You're in Article 3. Well, the judge who enjoined the OMB order that has now been withdrawn is a 2023 appointment by Joe Biden that was approved 51-50 with Kamala Harris casting the vote. Have you seen that anywhere,
No.
Abe Greenwald?
No, I've not.
What's that tell you?
Oh, I'm with you. The media have learned nothing.
Nothing.
And they sound as if Kamala's still running, and there's a chance for Joy to come back and to defeat Trump. They haven't woken up after Election Day.
I like your Joy conversation, by the way. I especially want to know, before I forget, before we run out of time, why did you guys decide to crash the opening weekend of Captain America: Brave New World? I think you've crushed their opening weekend. Absolutely destroyed it. I'm not going.
Well, that was something, John is a connoisseur of pop culture and of movies, and this was a story that had come to his attention, not to mine. As I think it was Continetti said on the show, Matt Continetti was surprised that John was surprised that the star who was portraying Captain America said that Captain America shouldn't represent America because he's representing truth and justice and all sorts of things that, by implication, America doesn't stand for. I recalled while we were having this conversation that the Superman comics in 2021 or so had pulled "And the American Way" from the Superman line of his fighting for truth, justice, and the American way. So I figured this is just where they are. But it's another example of the media of sorts, the entertainment industry, really not having gotten the memo. It's not 2020, it's not the George Floyd summer, and the majority of the country knows it. I've
got a buddy, John Schroeder. He writes for my blog occasionally, and he's a comic book aficionado and collector, and it's one of his hobbies. And he can give you line and verse of how woke comic went. Do you think we've turned a corner on woke, Abe Greenwald?
I can't speak to the world of comics. I think we turned a corner on woke a few years ago, to be honest. I think the high water mark probably was around 21, 22, and then for a number of reasons, including the crime spike after the withholding of funds from police, the whistleblower reports and studies that came out about transgender medical care for kids, and I think a number of things woke up a larger number of people, and we're still seeing it. We're not out of the woke woods, but I could see the clearing.
Abe, I want to know what you do for your newsletter. I get news items every day. I'm down to the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times. I've canceled every other newspaper. I get the free press, and I pay for news items because I got to know what's going on in the world. Now you have a new newsletter. What are you looking for in the commentary newsletter? What do you put in there?
Well, what mine is not, it doesn't have the aggregator quality of a lot of others. I write something like a column every day for it. Sometimes I will use material from Commentary's archives because we've been in existence for nearly 80 years, and there's very often some brilliant and shockingly relative pieces in there that can shed light on what's going on now. But really, I'm trying to flesh out my thoughts on that day politically, whether what's happening here, what's happening abroad, or a general trend in the country. And I write my piece, and then below it you have all the links. You have the links to the most recent blog post. You have the links to the most recent podcast, and links to the month's issue, the articles in the current issue.
So, Abe, last question. We're almost completely in sync on matters of national security. And I say we, that means me and your ensemble. What I want to know, though, is are you surprised by the success of the Commentary podcast? Because it's my first listen every day. I assume other people made it their first listen because it's smart. Are you surprised by that?
I think I'm a little surprised by the size of the success. I mean, I thought we were good, and I like it. But I think it comes down to our being quite unique. We have a unique chemistry between us. We are ideological in the sense that we are ideas-based, but we are not predictably partisan. I mean, we're a little predictably partisan, but the idea is not politics. It is ideas. And there's also the window into matters Jewish and what's happening in Israel that you don't get other places. So there's a unique recipe, I think, that people respond to. And I think I know that I enjoy doing it, certainly during the pandemic when we started doing it so often. I think that's when it became really vital for those of us on the podcast, and the closeness of the group, even though it's changed over time, I think probably is conveyed to the listener. And we're all quite different. You know, we're all quite different.
Ages
even though
are
we're
different.
on the same page.
The ages are different. The experiences are different. I just can't recommend it enough to people who like me. They will love Commentary Podcast and, of course, Commentary Magazine. Abe Greenwald, thank you for joining me. I'll talk to you again next month.
Thank you so much.
My phone number is 1-800-520-1234. That's been my phone number for 25 years. 1-800-520-1234. Now, if you are new to the show, because we moved into the afternoon drive in the East, 3 to 6 in the East, and noon to 3 in the West, and you're new to the show and you didn't hear it when it was on in the afternoon until 2016 when I took over when Bill Bennett retired, and you just came in the last 8 years, you notice one thing about my show. I do not take a lot of calls, but once in a while, I do. I plan on it. Today is one of those days. So if you want to say anything about anything that's not nuts, and we have a pretty good screen. We know who the nutters are. And there are a lot of them. Look, there's 330 million Americans. There's 1% that are the farthest left, and there are 1% that are farthest right. And I do not want to talk to them. They can listen, don't want to talk to them. But I do want to hear from who's listening right now, 1-800-520-1234. Because after 3 weeks, we're starting to settle into a rhythm, battle rhythm. And we know what to put up on the YouTube channel, and we know what to put on the podcast, and we know what to post at my Facebook page, and what goes over at hughhewitt.com. And we also do not let nutters through. So don't call me if you've been drinking. Don't call me if you want to go on a screed that's full of profanity or vulgarity. You won't get through. But I do want to kind of know who's listening. What's a sampling of what's going on out there? 1-800-520-1234. Let me remind everyone, Relief Factor is I want to get this reminder in before I go to the phones. This is Relief Factor. I take it every day. I try to do 4 to 6 miles every day and more on Saturday, none on Sunday. And the reason I try and do that is I want to do this for a long time. And that requires being in good shape, cardiovascular health, still can't dodge a falling anvil, still can't dodge the kids on those motorcycles. But Relief Factor makes me quick because I stay in shape. And Relief Factor gets rid of the absolute worst of the side effects of trundling, which is minor aches and pains. You know, you strain your calf, you strain your Achilles, you strain your quad, whatever it is. It doesn't happen. It just does not happen. You can still get injured if you fall down. You can still get injured if you get hit by one of the kids on the motorized bicycles. But I'm here to tell you, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, or go to relieffactor.com. Kevin in my good old home state of Virginia. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Fine, Hugh. And first of all, thank you very much for your October phone call with Mike Waltz and mentioning his new book and the Rocky Versailles Plaza.
Oh.
Very kind of you to do that.
Happy to do that.
Secondly, you mentioned it on your program.
Oh, it's
today.
Kevin. It's Colonel Kevin.
Yeah.
Oh, good to talk to you, Colonel.
Great talking to you, Hugh. Hope you're enjoying things in Orange County.
I am for another 2 months. Then I'll be back.
Right. You mentioned it a little bit on your program today. Can anything be done with regard to Joe Biden's incapacity or incompetence mentis with regard to not only those the commutations, but him signing any bills whatsoever?
Kevin, I really don't think so. And I'm talking as a con law professor here. The 25th Amendment exists so that the vice president or a member of the cabinet can trigger the process. If they don't do it, there is no process. If a presidential signature is on something, it's done. So if he signed a bill into law, even if he was impaired, even if in a court of law we could prove that a change to his testamentary disposition of his estate is not legal, we can't do that with the president. I don't even know how we would begin to do that. I don't know who has standing to bring that. Certainly not the victims or the criminals who've been commuted. Certainly not the people who don't like laws. There are these justiciability issues when it comes to bringing a court case. I pounded into my students. You got to be in the right court. Jurisdiction's got to be right. You've got to have state action if it's a constitutional issue or if it's a common law case. There's just a bunch of standing, mootness, ripeness, not a political question. I run through them all. I don't know how you even get this issue raised, and I don't know that Congress has the constitutional authority to investigate the president's mental capacity. So we were screwed.
Another question, if you have a minute.
Yeah.
And that's with regard to orders coming down from the president, let's specifically Mayorkas, and not following the law and allowing illegals in, and
there's nothing we can do, but if someone was injured by an illegal alien, there's a potential what we call Bivens action there, but they're very hard to prove, or a federal agent acting outside of their lawful authority. But very, very difficult lift, Kevin. Mostly we got to live and learn and make sure that the presidents we elect are not in mental and physical decline. Kevin, thank you, Colonel. One of those rare times on the program, I'm actually taking phone calls. Sally in Cleveland, how are you, Sally?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to comment on the passage of the Lake and Riley Act. I was brought to tears listening to her mother, and her gracious speech. And I've done grief counseling before. I can't imagine the difficulty grief journey ahead of them. But I'm glad President Trump was able to give them a little comfort in his tribute to Laken Riley with this act, and hopefully more lives can be spared by the passage of this act. And I want to send our prayers to the family.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you so much.
All right, I want people to understand what the Laken Riley Act does is require the detention of illegal aliens who commit a series of crimes for which they were previously not detained, such as theft. So it will simply require ICE to build and the Congress to fund more detention facilities, and that's good. Let's go to Sam in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Hello, Sam.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
Great to be on the show. I've made the transition from driving into Trundle in the morning to the evening ride home.
There you go. You
Love
see,
the show.
which is the longer commute?
Well, I'm trying to. I hope my better half isn't listening. I make the drive home a little longer so I can catch a little bit more of the show.
I like that. Better halves have to understand. You got to get your news and your information, Sam. Are you on the
exactly.
Schuylkill?
And inspiration.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Which parkway do you have to take in Williamsport?
Actually, I am in the middle of Pennsylvania, Williamsport, all the Little League baseball. And,
yes.
I'm driving into the hills, man. It's we've done a good thing this year, and totally enjoy the show. And an inspiration as we're kind of in the same age range. I like hearing your enthusiasm for trundling.
Oh, you got to get out
getting
there
out and
every
moving.
day. Are you a trundler?
Heck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes,
Doesn't
indeed.
matter. We are not
Yeah.
as fast as we once were, but that does not mean we cannot go as far as we always did.
No, and indeed. I tried to do it when I turned 60, and but, I've had an interesting day. My son is finishing his PhD work on physical oceanography, and he kind of was distraught by the pausing of the federal grant and aid and everything. And, I had a just interesting
Sam, here's what you tell him, and I'm serious about this. If he's doing good work, he'll get the money. If you're doing good work, you'll get the money. And physical oceanography is good work.
I feel like we are in a merit-based world again, right? And
yep.
I just kept telling him, obviously he's on the other side of the political spectrum, and I said, don't get distracted, man. You're doing great work.
No, I know, for example, I got a buddy up in Maine, Tony, Two Speeds Tony, Tony, the commercial real estate guy, and he's introduced me to the Gulf of Maine Institute. They do great work because the Gulf of Maine is getting warmer, and that's going to destroy the livelihoods of a bunch of people who lobster for a living or shrimp for a living or clam or oyster for a living. And we got to figure out what to do about that and how to deal with it. And it's a real deal. It's a real problem. It's not made up. The oceans are getting warmer. Whether or not we caused that doesn't matter. It's a real thing. So physical oceanography is a good thing to study. Hey, Sam, I got to run on. I appreciate the call. Press on, trundle on. Let's go out to Colorado and talk to John. Hello, John in the Rocky Mountain Centennial State. How are you? John, where'd you go? John left. All right, Randy, Knoxville. How are you, Randy?
Hey, Hugh, I'm great, thanks. Congrats on the new gig like we talked about before. I wish you'd take more calls, man. I love hearing from your listeners and my fellow citizens.
I do my show, and you get a lot of great guests, but sometimes you get callers.
Hey, it's great. I wanted to ask you, as a lawyer and a guy on the inside, I love the idea that Trump's floating around about possibly changing this, what I think is unconstitutional 16th Amendment income tax, going back to customs and tariffs, making the money like what made us a great country back in the late 1800s.
Randy, I'll give you my answer. I don't know, because tariffs are not in my wheelhouse. The income tax is constitutional because of the 17th Amendment, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know. I loved what he did to Colombia. That was using the tariff power to club Colombia into taking back their criminals, and that was good.
Yeah.
All right,
Hey,
buddy. Thank you. Dave in Stillwater, Minnesota. Cold. Hello, Dave. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
What's
Happy
the
to hear
temperature
you
in Minnesota?
On
Cold.
my way home.
I love talking to him on your way home. What's the temperature up there today?
Oh, gosh, today it's a nice balmy mid-30s. It's just amazing.
You know, they always lie in Minnesota about how cold it is. For years, I've been exposing that fraud. And the power line guys and the fraudsters boys and Lilacs, they say it's so cold, the ice, et cetera. It's not. It's balmy.
I love it. Climate change is a beautiful thing for me anyway, because I'm a transplant up here from the South. So there you have it.
Thank you for calling. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind is President Trump has enacted or signed or whatever, executed a record number of executive orders. Is it possible for any one of his executive orders to be taken up by Congress, recast as a bill with the hopes of becoming law one day?
Yes. In fact, they could do it on the budget reconciliation if it impacts the budget. Now, for example, if they want to reduce the size of the federal government, the president obviously does. He's offered an early out package to 2 million people. If they want to force that, they can add as a budget reconciliation measure that the president and his designees have the whole authority, notwithstanding any other law, regulation, guideline, or contrary rule, to reduce the federal workforce by 10% at every agency and department within 6 months, no matter what the tenure, no matter what the contract. They can abrogate it all. They can do that, and they can do it in reconciliation. They can pass it with 51 votes in the Senate, and I hope they do. I'm writing about it for Fox News tomorrow. That's one that they can do. Some people argue they can do birthright citizenship. I don't think they can. I think it's beyond Section 4 of the 14th Amendment. It is going to be what it is going to be, and the Section 4 of the 14th Amendment does not empower them to take remedial action there. But who knows? Thank you so much, Dave. 1-800-520-1234. 1-800-520-1234 connects you to this, the Hugh Hewitt Show. I want to take one more call. Greg in Arizona. How are you, Greg?
Hey, Hugh, how are you doing today? We have both sides of the Senate, the House and the Senate, and the presidency. How much do you think the Supreme Court is going to play in the next 4 years?
Well, the president can't violate the Constitution. Congress can't violate the Constitution. But if they don't violate the Constitution, there's incredible deference exercised by the sixth justice originalist majority towards acts that are authorized or within the inherent power of the executive or the legislative branch acting in concert with the president. So my answer is as much as is necessary, and I hope not much is necessary. It's a good court.
Thank you, sir.
It's a good court. I want to play one thing for everyone. Trey Gowdy was on Fox with Dana Perino this morning, and I think Kash Patel is going to be a great... I don't know Kash. I know he worked for Robert O'Brien, and Robert O'Brien thinks he's a great guy, and Robert O'Brien's one of my closest friends. Trey Gowdy said this about Kash Patel to Dana Perino this morning. Cut number 4, if you will, Harley.
I talked to Kash often. I worked side by side with Kash for 2 years. I can promise you this, Dana, Kash Patel will be a lot more fair to his opponents than they ever were to him, including the New York Times. The New York Times has been writing hit pieces on Kash Patel since the moment I met him. You know, he told me something last night that kind of epitomizes who Kash is. He's willing to meet with senators who will never vote for him. He knows they're not going to vote for him, but that's exactly what kind of law enforcement officer you want, that's going to be fair to you no matter what. Even if you don't want them to be fair to you, they're going to be fair. The fact that Kash Patel would take and ask and seek meetings with people who will never, ever vote for him tells you what you need to know about him. His North Star, Dana, is fairness. And look, the New York Times has not liked him from the moment Devin Nunes' memo came out, and it's nice to see that they're at least consistent. If wrong,
Thank
they're
you, Trey
consistent.
Gowdy. Everyone has an opinion on Kash Patel. They don't know his qualifications, which are enormous. And he's been at the highest level of clearances in the national government forever, so he's gone through the full field FBI background. He'll be confirmed. Probably be 53-47, but he'll be confirmed. Hey, I want to close with one more call, but I do want to let you know the smartest 79,500 people in America are the people who subscribe to my YouTube channel, because then they don't miss anything that matters on the Hugh Hewitt Show, and they can get it in bite-sized event. Please go and subscribe. Hugh Hewitt, YouTube. Subscribe and like it. Aisha in Dallas. You have 30 seconds, Aisha.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to President Trump for bringing down the hammer of law and order and implementing the hiring freeze in the federal civil service work sector. I am an Army veteran. I've had negative experiences seeking initial appointment and having my rights violated under the Veterans Preference Act of 1944. I hope all veterans out there research their rights under the act. And God bless everyone.
Thank you, Aisha. Keep going. Keep thanking for your. I thank you for your service, and I will never stop doing so.